I am a libertarian-esque Republican. And so that is from the base from which I make all of my arguments. I am somebody who believes in minimal government intervention in most cases. However, I am also somebody who has spent 12 years working in politics, and I am politically practical. And by virtue of that, I believe that we are often in the situation, and particularly with the Libertarian Party. My mother, by the way, is a registered Libertarian, so I grew up with that, and she likes David more than me. She threatens me all the time that she'll take him over me any day of the week. But ultimately, I believe that by virtue of the fact that Libertarians have yet to be really elected to anything of significance in almost 30, how many?
That's 1971, we reformed.
Okay, so 40-ish years. By virtue of that fact, that actually doesn't translate into outcomes, which I know is something that we are all in this room interested in. So, David and I will often have the debate, well, is McCain better than Obama? And ultimately, I would argue yes, McCain is better than Obama, and libertarians do, in cases, act as spoilers. We have the case of Owen Hill down in Colorado Springs. He is a would-be state senator. He could have taken out John Morse. I don't know if you guys have been watching the news the last few days, but John Morse, who got $40,000 in untaxed per diems, could have been taken out by Owen Hill, but he actually had a strong libertarian candidate running against him. And then David will say things like, for instance, how can you assume that somebody would, I could debate your side, that somebody who, how can you assume somebody who would vote for a libertarian would then vote for a Republican? But in a case like Owen Hill, I think it's logical to assume that a larger percentage of people who would have voted for the Libertarian candidate would have voted for the Republican. So, and I'm not saying it needs to be even particularly significant. It just needs to be a marginal difference. And I tend to believe that Libertarians are closer in affiliation by virtue of the economic issues to Republicans than to Democrats, and therefore would have voted with a higher percentage for Republicans than Democrats. And so, if you believe in outcomes, ultimately, you think that the Libertarian Party creates a situation where the perfect is the enemy of the good, where you hold all of these standards up to such a high level that no one can meet them and therefore cannot be elected.
So let's look at the Republicans' record. The very first Republican president was Abraham Lincoln, about 160 years ago. Say what you want about the good things he did. He also declared martial law. He also ignored the dictates of the United States Supreme Court in order to fight a war. And he suspended habeas corpus. None of those things can be fairly described as being pro-freedom or pro-limited government. Let's jump ahead to Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt, who was just an avowed progressive and a Republican president, actually said that private property must no longer be subject to private individuals' own desires. This is a paraphrase, but it's out there. He said the private property must be subject to the good of the common person. So the private property to him was less important than this progressive collective attitude. Again, a president with an R beside his name. Let's jump ahead. Let's go up to Richard Nixon. And we can ignore the corruption part of it because that's not relevant. Richard Nixon started the Environmental Protection Agency, a Republican giving us a new government agency. He instituted wage and price controls, not exactly a free market type of philosophy. Move ahead, and then we get to George W. Bush, and that's just too easy. TARP, No Child Left Behind, Patriot Act, absolutely. Steel tariffs. I mean, we could just go on and on. But
wait, smile.
I got to try this. I need a beer. But he had to abandon free market principles to save the free market. So that's why it's all okay. John McCain, then the next guy who was nominated for president, not only did he back a lot of the same stuff, he gave us the McCain-Feingold Act, an anti-First Amendment piece of federal legislation. And let's look at Colorado real quick. Our last Republican governor was a cheerleader for Referendum C, a massive tax increase that was the time out from Tabor. So, that's basically the record. I submit that is not very good record if one is in favor of advancing liberty. Now, given that record, I will submit that the libertarians will win this argument if they don't screw it up. If they haven't made it worse, they win.
Wait.
And we have not made it worse, and yes, because we rarely get anybody elected beyond the local race. Nevertheless, we ain't making it worse.
And do you concede that sometimes the Libertarian Party acts as a spoiler?
When you say spoiler, I would disagree with the concept of a spoiler.
Do you concede that sometimes the Libertarian Party changes the outcome of elections?
Yes. Yes.
Like Owen Hill.
That may possibly, yeah, absolutely.
And by possibly you mean likely yes.
Well, let me put it this way. Everyone, because what happened there, Owen Hill lost by fewer votes than the Libertarian got in that election.
Way fewer. Like less than 5% difference in what the Libertarian actually got. The Libertarian who was then later shown to have taken points from Owen Hill's website for his. Wait, what?
You're getting off on a tangent.
I know I'm getting off on a tangent, but I'm just saying that do you concede that at times the Libertarian Party can change the outcome of elections?
Yes, I agree with that. But how about this? Competition is generally considered to be a Republican value. We want competition in the free markets. We want competition amongst public schools. We want competition everywhere except in elections, because it's much easier to maintain control if there's only two choices. I submit that every person that voted for the Libertarian in that race looked at the ballot and saw Owen Hill's name on it. Every single one of them saw the Republican on that ballot. Every single one of them made their conscious decision not to vote for Owen Hill. That is competition. And if Owen Hill wanted those votes, he needed to earn them. Nobody's votes belong to anybody but each and every single one of you. And sometimes you'll hear somebody say, oh, they stole the election. That is the height of arrogance, my friends, because that means that somebody owns your vote. Because you can't steal something that belongs to you. So,
I like that.
thank you.
Nicely done.
Well, part of the problem, you've just given me the segue into approval voting. Plurality voting in a two-party system is not the only method invented in the history of the world to elect a winner. In fact, there are multiple ways to hold an election. Plurality voting is not in the Constitution of the United States, it's not in the Constitution of the state of Colorado, and it wasn't handed down by God to Moses on the top of Mount Sinai. It can be changed by simple legislative process. And when Kelly complains that the Libertarians messed up that race, this is where they want it both ways. If the Libertarians are going to play by the rules, and all third parties, Greens, whoever, if we're going to play by the rules that are made by the two-party duopoly, the Republicans and the Democrats who play ping-pong back and forth and nothing ever gets smaller, the federal government's never gotten smaller, ever, not since the Civil War. They go back and forth, they make the rules, and then they complain when we play by them. If they don't want us spoiling this election, change the rules, and then we can't spoil it.
Back to politics in reality, we are voting in reality. And until that is actually the case, here's where we are. And we are in a situation where John Morse is in leadership because of the Libertarian Party. And ultimately, as a politically practical person, I understand that elections are won and ideas are won incrementally. So I have taken it upon myself to run for party leadership within the Republican Party. And I take it upon myself every day to be a blogger in defense of freedom, but a Republican blogger in defense of freedom. Specifically, not just to hold liberals accountable, but to hold our own people accountable, which I have done. And so ultimately, I think everybody has to ask themselves, do you want to be an outsider in a party that that makes a lot of noise but doesn't actually change anything? Or do you want to change one of the parties that's already in power towards free market and libertarian-esque principles?
But I'll also just say this when it comes to winning. If one defines winning as electing John McCain, you can have it. If one defines winning as having someone slightly less statist than the other party, you can have it. So if you're going to define winning to include losing, you can have it. And as far as the facts are the facts. We haven't won anything beyond local races throughout our history when we were formed in 1971 in Colorado. Well, I would just point out that in 1772, George Washington hadn't won any battles against the British either. So if you don't start, you can't finish.
It didn't take Washington 40 years.
Oh, wait a minute. It didn't take Washington 40 years. Touche, it did not.
Okay, and once again, Mr. Williams has made my point for me. What's fantastic about this is that ultimately, I think if you are going to look at the field and you look at Obama versus McCain, I was not a fan of McCain. I have very strong difficulties with his policies regarding particularly campaign finance reform. But at the end of the day, I do not question whether or not he would be a better president than Obama. And when I say that my issue with the Libertarian Party is that the perfect is the enemy of the good, that right there, the rhetoric of if there is any loss other than what it is that is within our perfect box of what is appropriate or not, is that is case in point. It is the perfect allowing the hard left to get elected.
I'll grant that McCain would be slightly better than Barack Obama. Running into a tree at 90 is slightly better than running into a tree at 100.
And yet, your chances of living are higher if you run into a tree at 90. I tend to think that furthering liberty means working within the structure of a party that actually gets elected to office.
If the Republican Party was full of people like you, there wouldn't be a need for a Libertarian Party.
Oh.
Dave, really, you say that your main goal is to reduce the size of government. But then how do you measure that with protecting rights? For example, you have libertarians who are avowed anarchists. You have Ron Paul, whose anti-American sentiments are indistinguishable from those of Ward Churchill. You have libertarian leaders who want to repeal laws against having sex with children. You have a Senate candidate for the Libertarian Party sentenced to prison for threatening a judge. So when your goal is to reduce government, how do you keep the consistency with protecting individual rights?
See if I can remember all of those. First of all, Ron Paul's a Republican. Thank you very much.
Hello, now.
Absolutely. But yeah, he's a small L Libertarian Republican.
There are lots of us.
Yes, absolutely. Regards to Mary Ruart's book where she mentions that disgusting things about child sex, she's wrong. She's just absolutely wrong. There's nothing wrong with the state protecting people that can't make their own decisions. Minors and other people that don't have that capacity. There are people in the libertarian movement that are wrong. So I think that's the best way I can respond to that question.
Okay. Republicans can be wrong too. There are those of us within the party who believe that you can move the ball forward, and that part of advocating for liberty is advocating for liberty within your party.